for all of us. It's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. Today on the show, I've got Byron Sharp, who's Professor of Marketing Science at the University of South Australia and Director of the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. Byron's also the author of How Brands Grow and What Marketers Don't Know. The book provides evidence-based answers to key questions asked by marketers every day. Things like, how does advertising work and how do brands really grow? What do price promotions do? And are loyalty programs really that effective? On today's show, we talk a little bit about the myth that Byron doesn't believe in loyalty. We also tackle a couple chapters in the book in terms of how advertising really works and what price promotions really do. Well, Byron, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alan. It's nice to be here.
I appreciate that. It's an honor to be interviewing you today. I'm a big fan of the book. But before we get to the book, why don't you tell us a little bit more about your background and why did you select marketing as a focus area?
Well, probably like a lot of people, I fell into it. My background, like at high school, I was more of a art history guy. And I don't know, I guess I decided that the only jobs in that would be, a history professor or something, which I didn't want to be an academic. So I went to do a commerce degree where I was going to specialize in management. And I found the management classes very pseudo-academic. Coming from I think I came from a more academic background. I just thought this was just silliness. But the marketing classes I enjoyed. I mean, probably the lecturers were better or something. I don't know. But I certainly I enjoyed Philip Kotler's book. I thought this was, as a 17-year-old or whatever, this taught you something about what, businesses did, the basic thing of business, which was providing products and services for customers. So I enjoyed that. That's what I thought I would be sort of learning about management. So I readjusted and went, no, I'm doing marketing. I'm a marketing major. And then years later, I fell into academia, sort of accidentally, and one day woke up and realized, I guess I'm a scientist. Which there was no plan there. But, I ended up, I was in my area, marketing, but I was, just studying a bit of the real world like all scientists do. I've just fallen into marketing as that area. It's a fun area to be in, because there's so little is known. So that's quite nice.
Right. So you made this comment that you didn't want to become an academic, but now you're an academic. Do you feel bad about that?
No, I love my job. It's fantastic. Okay. But as a teenager, no, I didn't want to be an academic.
So maybe it wasn't seen as cool. I don't know, but you made it cool now.
Yeah, I mean, we never know. There's that lovely talk that Steve Jobs gives. So you can never really plan again, but you can look back and you can see how the dots connect.
Right. Well, so in 2010, you published How Brands Grow and What Marketers Don't Know. So 7 years on, this book is, I think, taken on a life of its own. It seems to get more popular in the circles that I run in every month, and that's kind of an amazing feat for something that came out 7 years ago. But what drove the creation of that book?
Okay. Yeah, it is. I mean, yes, every year it sells more. I mean, I think it's still early days. Yes, it does. It has taken on a life of its own, and quite literally because it was never designed to sell to mass markets. Now, the book came about because the Ehrenberg Bass Institute has advisory boards in the US and Europe and Australia, and board members asked for us to write a book on the early fundamental findings. The intention was that they wanted a book that you could give to chief marketing officer, could give to their CEO and CFO and others and say, you've heard we're making changes in marketing again, but this time there's some science behind them. It's not just the latest fashion, and so this would, as we've seen, it does. I mean, it enhances the status of marketing in an organization when you can do that, when you can start this sort of evidence-based marketing journey. So the book needed to be hardcover. It needed to have a prestigious publisher, and we got Oxford University Press, and they're not too shabby. So that's what fitted the bill, and that's what it's for. But as I say, then it started to sell, and Ad Age, it got voted was it Book of the Year or something, and It's been covered in Financial Times and others. So yeah, it has taken on a life of its own. It was the subtitle of it. What marketers don't know. It was always designed to. That was a bit provocative. Deliberately provocative. But it was designed to, I suppose, catch attention. It was never put out, and it never appeared on bookshelves and things. Oxford University Press or an academic publisher, they don't have a sales force.
Right. You in the book you tackle a number of different myths, I would call them, around it, and we'll get to some of them around how advertising actually works. But one of the things I think, as we were talking before, it seems like it's a myth or maybe a misconception that you don't believe that brand loyalty actually exists. And I just want to give you a chance to correct the record, because I think you do.
Yes, that's quite interesting. As the book has become more famous, obviously, in many ways, in the same sort of thing that we would expect for brand buying, you get a lot of light users, i.e., people who might have bought the book but only read a chapter, or meaning to read the book, or have read a little summary of the book. So needless to say, there's a lot of, a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. So yeah, the funniest one I think of is this idea that Ehrenberg Bass have proven there's no such thing as brand loyalty, whereas if you actually read the book, we've got lines like, brand loyalty is part of every market. We see it everywhere.
Right.
Be more blunt in saying there's loyalty, but the thing is, it's just different from the old conception of brand loyalty of passionate consumer commitment or falling in love with brands. This is consumers are naturally loyal. All brands actually enjoy pretty high loyalty, but it's like gravity. It's not something that you can move around dramatically. I mean, it's a natural part of markets, and so it's predictable. We can predict a brand's loyalty metrics based on its size.
So would you, and I'm going to test you here a little bit, would you then say that loyalty is there, but you should be investing in availability, whether that's mental or physical availability?
Yeah, that's the theory that binds together the laws that are presented in the natural laws that are presented in the book, that brands different. If you want to grow your brand, then you have to enhance mental and physical availability. And in doing so, you will, of course, get more customers if you're more available to the wider market. But also those customers will be a little bit more loyal because you will just be easier to be loyal to. Or another way of putting it is that you're a little bit harder to get away from. I always use the example of, asking, have you ever done what I do, which is, you eat a meal at McDonald's and then you sort of slap your forehead and say, never again. No, I'm not going to do this again. But you know from your own behavior, you probably will. And this is the advantage that big brands with high mental and physical availability have. McDonald's is just a little bit harder to get away from. There's going to be a time when you're short of time and you look down the street and you see a McDonald's and you know what they sell and you know how much you're going to pay and you know about how long it's going to take, and all these things make it very suddenly easy and attractive, even if you don't like the food terribly. In contrast, we've all been to a great little cafe or restaurant and said, wow, this is great, love the food, I must come back here, and then we haven't. Because, we never really quite remembered the name or exactly the street it was on. We got no reinforcing advertising, and it was just a little bit harder. So, yes, mental and physical availability they're what make companies valuable. And that's a fantastic story for marketing because, if you asked a CEO, if you showed a CEO and go, really, look, you're a Google or a Coca-Cola or whatever, really the value of this company is entirely about the mental and physical availability you've built up, isn't it? And I think most of them would go, well, yeah, everything else is replaceable and not terribly valuable, but it's the mental and physical availability. And then you say, well, who looks after that in the organization? And it's sales and marketing, which I think would be quite a shock to, CEOs of banks and things, because they think, oh, God, we don't take those people seriously at all. And yet they're in charge of the most valuable assets the organization has.
Right. Well, so physical availability, I'm going to shorthand this, but is largely kind of distribution and where you show up in the world.
Yeah, which means in today's world, that's not it's not just bricks and mortar, that's also online, and it's also hours, opening hours. So it is actually quite complicated.
Right.
It's more than just getting, and I love it when people say, well, we've got 100% physical availability. I go, really? You're right next to every single consumer, and they go, oh, no, we're in all the major supermarkets. Right. Okay. Wow. If Coke had adopted that thinking, they'd stopped trying to gain more physical availability in about 1952 or something.
That's true. And on a recent vacation, we could find Coke products in these back roads of Costa Rica. So I don't even know how the distribution gets there, but it does.
It's impressive, isn't it?
It is.
I also had a question recently with someone. They said, but what happened? Our brand's already got 100% mental availability. I thought, well, consumers think of nothing else in their lives but your brand. What they meant is in them, market research tracking that, they had 100% recognition. Well, that's a long way from 100% mental availability.
Right. Well, I think talking about this mental availability leads us to advertising, which is chapter 9 of the book. How advertising.
One of my favorite chapters, and most ignored actually. But I suppose because the other things in the book about loyalty and differentiation and some of those other things are so shocking to marketers that drowns out everything else, and so it gets an enormous amount of attention. But the advertising chapter is really important, I think. We've learned a lot about advertising by actually studying what people actually do in their behavior and what they actually are exposed to. So, sorry, you had a question about the...
Well, yeah. So, it attempts to kind of demystify how advertising works. And, I wondered if you could just describe to listeners, how does it work? Okay.
The chapter gives, I think, 5 mechanisms through which advertising works. Advertising is complicated. There are multiple ways that it works, often simultaneously. Because one of the most important things that it points out is that awful lot of people, the dominant theory of how advertising works, people just find it so hard practitioners find it so hard to get out of their head. This idea that advertising works like a trial lawyer, like Clarence Darrow or something, that makes convincing arguments and changes people's view on the brand, or tells them why it is that they should need this brand in their life and not this other one. And that's actually a really small part of the way that advertising works. Occasionally there are persuasive messages, but even when we content analyze advertising, we've done this with using people on the street, people in ad agencies and others, and we've looked at ads over time, etc. And everyone agrees when they actually look at the ads that more than half of ads don't even try to make a persuasive message. And when you realize, you think of Olympics advertising, or sport advertising around the football stadium, and there'll be the cunningly crafted persuasive message that says Sony. Right. When you realize that, okay, this persuasion theory has got to be a bit overblown because there's got to be something else. And so the dominant way, I say there are, if you read the chapter, there's like 5 ways mechanisms that advertising works, but the dominant way is about refreshing memory structures. So a typical fast-moving consumer goods brand, 80% or so of its customer base are buying it once a year or less often than that. And these people are given an enormous amount of the sales volume in any year. Huge proportion of the sales volume in any way comes from people who did not buy last year or the year before that, just because they're so light. So they've got a chance of buying your brand this week or tomorrow, something like 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000. And the way advertising works is when it does work, is by catching some attention and refreshing some memory structures, just making that brand just a little bit easier to see on shelf or see looking down the street, just making the brand just a little bit more accessible. And so this little nudge might be from 1 chance in 1,000 to buy the brand next week to 2 chances in 1,000 to buy the brand next week, which doesn't sound like much. Isn't much, right? And that's exactly why consumers say, when you ask them, are you affected by advertising? Are there any ads that you've seen today that changed your mind about a brand or something? They think these are preposterous questions. They go, no, of course not. No. Advertising doesn't affect me. Because moving from one chance in 1,000 to two chances in 1,000 is like being hit with a feather. It's nothing. But think of it from the brand's perspective, from the advertiser's perspective. If every single person who got hit with an exposure by our ad moved from one chance to two, the sales effect is double.
Right.
That's a huge uplift. And so people don't find this hard to understand in their heads. We can get huge uplift at an individual level, right? Advertising can actually be quite powerful, but it is actually like an extremely weak force. It's a bit like gravity. Gravity is an extremely weak force, but it can have very, very, very profound effects. And advertising is exactly the same, because we have so many consumers who are exceptionally low probabilities of buying us. And so that is quite a profound realization of what the role of advertising is. It's not to make them have religious conversions, to go, oh, wow, oh, geez, I didn't know that about that bank. Yes, gosh, that really does change my view. It's not to do that. It's to build and refresh little memory structures like, oh, that's the red one. Coke is still here. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
right.
I remember. Yeah, it tastes nice.
Right.
I used to drink it a lot when I was a kid. Yeah.
Well, so one of the things I've had or heard from other people, and I've had this thought myself, is I think I totally agree, and the evidence is obviously there in the book, that's how, on macro, how advertising works. But as I think about creating a new memory structure, or I think in your second book, you call it like a CEP, a category, and I forget the description.
Entry point, yeah. It's just a focus to say, not all memory structures are as useful as others.
Right.
We want to build memory structures that make it easier for people to buy us. So, if you're a consumer goods, if you're packaged goods, you really need to make sure they know what the pack looks like and how to, navigate the shelf. If you're a retail store, you need to, or a bank or something, you need to make sure that people know what your branches look like when they look down. So if you're selling services, if you're a department store or a university or a bank or something, you have to build memory structures so that people link you to the products that you actually, because that's, people don't go into a department store to just browse. They don't go into a bank to, learn what exciting new financial services they have. They go in because they go, I want a home loan. And so, the synapses fire in the brain, home loan, and that's the link. That's the category entry point you've got to link to.
Right. My guess is then advertising has to, along with all the other mechanisms at your disposal, at some level they have to, if you need to build those new memory structures, it also has to work against that, not just refresh existing memory structure.
Yeah, like McDonald's in recent years has had to build memory structure. We do breakfast, and what that means. Hash browns and other stuff, and that can be quite difficult to do. I see. Well, you'll see it's in the press at the moment, isn't it? That Coca-Cola are
with Coke Zero.
Working to clear up the mess that they sort of have found themselves after 50 years or so. And so they're finally saying, we've got Coke with sugar and we've got Coke without sugar. That's because an enormous amount of people didn't know that Coke Zero, or even Diet Coke, had no sugar in it.
Right.
That's obviously that's a shock for marketers when they see survey results like that. It's also a bit of an indictment, isn't it? We really do have to, basic things about our products, or things that people need to know in their heads in order to buy a particular product. And it's a lot harder than we think to get those into people's heads.
Well, and I know it's a move after Pepsi did it. I talked to the CMO that was behind the Pepsi move from Pepsi Max to Pepsi Zero Sugar earlier in the year. And they even put it in the Super Bowl halftime show. It was the Pepsi Zero Sugar halftime show. But it's interesting.
It's staggering, isn't it? I mean, there's a fundamental thing about marketing. We should never assume, go and find out with consumers. Because obviously, if you work in Pepsi or Coke, you know that one has 0 calorie. You know all this technical information, and it's not that complicated. So you think the consumers will know it too, but they live busy lives. They run on heuristics, and often they don't know these things.
Right. One other question I've batted around here as well as in conversations is how does, I know you have this approach that you need to reach as many consumers as possible because, to your point earlier, in fast moving consumer goods, 80% of people are casual buyers.
Yeah, very light, yes. Partly because they don't buy the category very often, but also because they buy multiple brands. They're polygamously loyal.
But in a world of limited resources on a brand side, how do you counsel folks on those trade-offs, right? I can't necessarily get the reach I would like.
Well, no one can, right? So when I'm in Atlanta, Coca-Cola moan about their limited budgets, which, no one has the budget that they want. But the rules, the guidelines are the same. We want to get as much from the budget that we have. And we do have to reach all the potential, all the consumers who potentially can buy our brand, all category buyers or all the category buyers that shop in the stores that we've got distribution. We have to reach them all with advertising. Now, if we've got a limited budget, we won't reach them as often. And no one will reach them as often as we like, but we still must gain as much reach as possible. So there's the temptation always to, I'm not sure why the logic. It's a bit like, it's a bit like going, this, you say, I know I have to fight the war, but wouldn't it be nice if I just concentrate on this little island here? I can take this island. That'd be fantastic. It'll be glorious. We'll have a glorious battle on this little island. You're like, great, but it's not. You still got to win the whole war. Every week I see some consultant, announce some new whiz-bang proprietary targeting technique, and they've identified, in the customer base, there's, this segment of consumers that shows 3 times, your advertising gets 3 times an effect with this group as the others. I'm like, well, yeah, so what? Still got to reach all the others. Yeah. It's like telling a salesperson, you need to win 10 new customers this year. And they, okay, that's their target, 10 new customers. They know that there's 2 or 3 customers who are, sort of warm prospects, very likely, almost there, only need a bit of a nudge. Okay, fine, sure. But they've still got to win the other 7. So, yes, we need to reach, and particularly we need to reach the big brands. They've got millions of very light, infrequent buyers. And if they do not reach those people, it's so easy for their brand to fall out of those people's lives. So just to stay where you are, you need to reach those people. And if you want to grow, well, you absolutely need to reach those people.
Do you believe that marketers are making a mistake by the medium choices that they're selecting to play in? The hypothesis is that TV has the greatest reach, right? Potentially.
Well, it depends on, you can't say anything about any particular medium. It depends on who you're selling to. So Ehrenberg Bass Institute doesn't advertise on TV because... Right. You're trying to reach chief marketing officers. No, so
it's easy to make a list of.
You have to crunch the numbers and see, but we need reach, and we need real reach. We need quality reach. We need to actually reach their brains, not reach their screening out. But yeah, TV is we've said for ages, TV is a very attractive medium because it delivers video, it delivers enticing videos to an audience that's sitting down wanting to watch video, who are relaxing, so they're not screening out. They have a tendency to take it in, and it is a massively fast and vast medium. So and it's not going away. That myth has died that TV is just dying. TV's not dying; it's having babies, if anything.
Right. I like that concept. It's having babies.
I think yes, that's not my quote. I think it comes from Lindsay Clay in the UK. It's very insightful.
Okay. Well, let's transition in gears a little bit. So we talked about Chapter 9 and advertising. Chapter 10, if you've ever worked in consumer packaged goods like myself and yourself, they love to pull the price lever.
Yes, it's a bit of a paradox, isn't it, Marcus?
It is.
Come out of their MBA, with a Kotler thing of saying, I must be premium priced. It's like a badge of honor. I must be premium priced. But then I'll do deep price promotions regularly.
And it's just the easy lever. It's the easy button, if you will. But what should marketers know about, if they haven't read that chapter or you want to point them back to it, what should they know?
I think we know price promotions are addictive because that's an insidious thing. We all need price promotions are part of the marketing world we live in. They are useful to consumers. They help them speed them through the supermarket because it allows a little heuristic, which one of my brands is on special. So there is some sort of value in it. But the insidious problem with price promotions is they give you a little sales spike. That feeds into, that hopefully lets you hit your sales target for the year or gives you your score. And then next year, invariably you're given the same sales target or higher, which means that the only way that you'll hit it is you have to do that promo again. And probably the temptation is to add another one as well. And then you do it the next year and the next year. So my colleague John Dawes has written this report for our sponsors about the addictive nature of price promotions. And of course, the other insidious thing is that your competitors don't want to give up their market share. And if you've only stolen it with something as easy as doing a price promotion, well, they can do that back. And so they do. And so you get hit with this double whammy. I mean, first of all, the sales spike that you got wasn't so attractive because the profits were very low because of the discount. But also, all those sales that you gained will be stolen back from you by competitors with their own price promotions, and they will be stealing sales that you would have had at full price. So they cost money. Any consultant who tells you that they've worked out, some price promotions can make money is just they've not factored in all the full things. They always lose money. That said, advertising costs money too, or lots of stuff we do in marketing costs money. So the thing is to manage them appropriately and get as much return as possible. And the largest return is not about getting the biggest spike. You have to work out what price promotions are for. So probably the most surprising thing that people would get in reading about what price promotions do, that chapter, is that they don't bring new consumers into the brand. Price promotions are seen largely by, they're like loyalty programs. They skew massively to our existing customers.
So not only are you're getting a spike on sales, but you're getting a spike on sales at a lower price with people that would have bought you otherwise.
Yes. Well, yeah. I mean, you do get an increase in sales in that period. So, if they, so you've got someone who, is coming up to the shelf, there's sort of 3 major brands in their repertoire, so you've got about 30% chance of being bought. But you're on promo today, so that 30% leaps to like 60%, and you double your sales. But it is with the people who already had a propensity, half of those would have bought anyway. And you've now given it to them, yes, at a discount price. They would have paid, half of them would have paid the full price. And that's if you get a sales uplift that's, double. So they are scary figures. So the bottom line is this is a big marketing investment and it needs to be managed carefully against objectives. And, the key objective is this allowing us to hold on to physical availability? Is this allowing us to gain physical availability? You should be thinking, okay, what's the minimum amount of price promo that I need to do to hold on to my physical availability? And be very careful about going beyond that. Because if you do, you're basically burning shareholder funds.
Interesting. I've never heard it put quite that succinctly. That I'm going to rephrase that for my own use and see if this makes sense to you. It's really about maintaining, if it's a brick and mortar, a retailer relationship, so you don't lose shelf space.
Yes. And, most sales teams are very honest about that. They'll say that's why we have to do price promotions, because it's part of the way the retailer does their business, and so that's fine. But you've got to make sure that you're managing against that objective, and that's quite rare. I've been on large groups of marketers saying, right, so you've all agreed, you do price promotions to maintain and maybe hopefully nudge some physical availability. Is that how you evaluate your price promos and choosing between the ones that work better or worse and how much you should have? And then everyone goes silent. It's like, oh, no, we don't.
Yeah. No, they're looking at lifts and telling themselves that they're getting volume they wouldn't have got otherwise.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And sometimes we're talking here about multi-billion-dollar investments.
Oh, I know. Yeah. Well, in some of the companies I've worked in, that's the trade promotion budget is 4 times the advertising budget at a minimum. It's insane.
It is insane. And so that's quite a tragedy for marketing and sales. But then, so CEOs should be told off as well. CEO, you go, hey, on your watch, you're spending like $4 billion on price promotions, and you don't actually have proper management things in place. You have people who do them. That's not managing, that's just doing them.
Right. And well, and to your point, I think a minute ago, is that the objective is ill-aligned with what they actually are good for.
Yeah.
So interesting. Well, I want to kind of step back a little bit from the book and just think about brand building today. What would you advise brand managers to be doing, and how can they build strong brands today?
Right. Well, that's a big question.
I know.
Strong brands. We want to build big profitable brands, which is a noble thing. We want to do stuff that matters for the consumers, for the marketplace. A tiny, small brand is not, it's not serving the needs of many people. So, yeah, I would rephrase that rather than building strong brands to saying we want to build big, profitable brands. Aside from companies in, say, mining, all the big sustainable businesses of the world are built on brands. They're built on building mental and physical availability. So it's quite a profound, realization that really underpins the value and sustainability of so many companies. So it's very, very important. Marketing is very, very important. And there are so many great brands in the world, but there are also, the rise of private label and even of the discounters like the German Aldi and Lidl, who stock non-brands, if you like, is because there are an awful lot of brands. I would say just they're not really brands. I mean, they're just stuff. They've got some physical availability, but it's very tenuous. In Australia, in any supermarket, there'll be lots of tinned tomatoes. I presume this is a phenomenon all around the world. Hugely dominated by Italy, right? So the Italians have done a very good job at creating, cheap. They've got the processes. They can build a can of tomatoes pretty well at a low price. But they're sort of non-brands, right? I mean, if you ask people, which one do you buy? They'll go, the Italian one. And they're all Italian. Yeah, well, I don't know. And an awful lot is like, I buy the Italian one that's in my supermarket. Oh, but there's 3 or 4 Italian ones. Yeah, well, I buy the one that's on special, or the one I just saw. They just have not gotten to people's heads. They have not built the distinctive assets that gives a brand, that allows consumers to be loyal to a brand. They're not really brands. So the desirable thing for a marketer is that you do build something that gets into people's heads, even if it is something that sounds as trivial as, well, I remember working for a bank in Australia for some years, the St. George Bank, and featured a dragon as its logo, and explaining to them, this is really important. You're the only bank that has a dragon. But being bankers, they're like, oh yeah, but what's that got to do with banking? I don't know. We don't, and every time they ran an ad that didn't feature a dragon, it just like went over everyone's heads. No one saw it, just pouring money down the drain. It's like, put the dragon in the ads. So these things that people think can be quite trivial are actually, this is what branding is all about. Most fundamental, it's not as mysterious as, there's so many books that are like quackery and pseudoscience about brands. They're very esoteric. Branding is looking like you and not someone else.
Interesting.
It depends on distinctive assets that you've got, a color or a shape or a dragon or whatever, a logo, a jingle, a style of advertising, a feel that people associate with you and they don't associate with other people, with other brands. And that's branding, and that's incredibly valuable. 99.9% of the world's brands have never measured their distinctive assets. That is, people can have the title brand manager, and yet they have not actually measured. They're not actually sure what's in people's heads. They're not sure how people recognize them rather than someone else. That again is an indictment on marketing. How can we say we're managing a brand and we not actually sure what it is that does the branding? So that's a good starting place. I say to every brand manager. Ehrenberg Bass Institute have developed a way. Jenny Romanek has developed the brand asset grid. We published on it. We can help you if you want, but everyone should be able to do some surveys and measure their distinctive brand assets. Otherwise, you're not really managing a brand.
Right. Well, that's a good point. I think good tip. So tell us a little bit more about the Ehrenberg Bass Institute and how you work with clients.
Okay, well, the Institute came about because I sort of fell into academia. I fell into working in the University of South Australia's commercialisation consulting company as marketing manager. And a good marketing manager, the first thing you do is you look at the books, you see where the sales are coming from. And I saw that the business school that I was associated with was a pretty woeful performer. basically sold catch-up courses, like 3-day, marketing training catch-up sort of course for those who hadn't done a degree, which, I thought that's not going to last. We'll soon have lots of marketing graduates out there who can do that themselves. But it was out in the science technology areas and the pharmaceutical and medical that they were bringing in quite substantial amounts of revenue as people were funding their research because they discovered stuff. And the world wanted, there's so much stuff we don't know about in the world. So when I sort of became a full-time academic, it occurred to me that we really needed to do some research, and probably there would be companies out there that would be willing to support new discoveries. And that's how the Ehrenberg Bass Institute came about. And today it's by far the largest such research institute for marketing in the world, because we have sponsors, corporate sponsors all around the world who provide us with financial support, and in return we continue to make discoveries. And well, it's not just that. I mean, obviously the discoveries are important, but most of our sponsors would say that the reason that they engage with the Ehrenberg Bass Institute is to help them on the journey to evidence-based marketing, to get their marketers focused on knowing what we do know about how the world works, and so not having arguments about in real-world stuff. Like if something's in the real world, there's a Unilever director who said to me, I want my staff to argue about the creative things. I don't want them to argue about real-world empirical. We should either know that or we'll go out and find it, but there's no point having arguments about it. Let's argue about architects do not argue about the laws of physics. They'll have pretty strong views on what makes a beautiful building or not, but they don't argue about the laws of physics. And in marketing, we need to move to that same thing. So our sponsors are on a journey to embed that, which is, it's not a trivial task. You don't turn marketers around and big marketing departments around, overnight. It takes a lot of changing of metrics, and people have to give up on some cherished beliefs. So you said how brands grow is myth-busting. Yeah, science has that tendency to be myth-busting. And, the real world is a strange place. It doesn't conform with our theories very often. But it's quite hard for people to give up cherished beliefs. It took doctors 150 years or more to start washing their hands. To adopt germ theory was very radical. They didn't like it at first. They didn't like it at first. They absolutely rejected it completely. The idea that doctors could be harming patients by touching them was, obviously that was pretty confronting for doctors. So the idea that, marketers might have been doing things that actually were bleeding their brands, or, while they were doing lots of price promotions, weren't actually managing them, that's confronting, and it takes time. So we work with, the Ehrenberg Bass Institute works with sponsors. I always see my job as director is to, if any sponsor says, we want to move faster, we want to engage more, that my job as director is to try to make sure that the institute can respond and can actually help them do that.
Interesting. Well, I usually like to step back from the conversation we've been having with all my guests and kind of ask a series of questions about you and kind of what drives you and things like that. But I want to start with, has become my favorite question to ask, is what experience of your past do you think defines or makes up who you are today, or makes you who you are today?
Well, that one I mentioned about, realizing that, while it was fun to be sort of pontificating business academic, but really just recycling the same stuff. And if you didn't make new discoveries, then, the world doesn't know you're living. And if you want people to fund you, you've got to discover new things. So that was very profound. I didn't expect, my background is not in science and stuff. So that was quite a surprise to see that that these science and technology people, they were outperforming the business stuff hugely. Businesses were far more likely to give them money than they were to the business school. That was a bit of a shock, and maybe rise to the challenge.
Interesting. What fuels your success or drives you to get up every day?
I don't know if anyone really knows that, do they? They're always on a journey to understand what. At least I like puzzling. I like finding things out and thinking about them. I spend my life. Well, actually, a huge part of the life is actually not so much making the discoveries, but working out how to, I suppose marketing, since communication, how to communicate it, how to get it across. And so, we look back on some of our early reports and things with some embarrassment, and it's like, oh, right, why did we say it in such a complicated way? Or why did we not realize that, it's so easy now, so easy once you realize this is the way to say it. So doing that puzzling, working that out, thinking about your audience, that is quite fun. It's fun knowing stuff. I say to all our young researchers, don't deny it. There is fun in being a bit of a smartass. Well, no one would. If you say to any person, would you like to be, give up on 10% of your memories or knowledge, or lose, I don't know, all your toes? No one would want to lose their knowledge because that's what makes them them.
Right.
So I think we probably all fear a lobotomy far more than we would fear, losing a limb.
Yeah, true. So you study marketing, so this might be a really hard question, and you have lots of clients, I must say. But what are there brands or companies, or I'll give you an out, causes that you think others should be taking notice of?
What, you want me to name like famous brands? No, I can't, and I can't publicly comment on. I get CEOs asking me this, how well are we doing, like on the evidence-based marketing journey. Obviously, I can't talk about, we're sponsored by Coke and we're sponsored by Pepsi and we're sponsored by Schweppes, so we can't say what any of the others do. So I'm going to take the out and talk about cause. Look. In the big picture, the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, while we study, marketing, it's just one part of the real world, and really the bigger picture is that we're part of the scientific revolution. A few hundred years ago, human beings invented this thing called science, and which was just about getting out into the real world and carefully observing and looking for patterns and documenting them and seeing where they hold and where they don't, which we call laws, scientific laws. Funny old-fashioned term for them. And this has utterly transformed our world. I mean, the world is just an amazingly better place. We've got 7 billion people on the planet, and hardly any of them are in starvation anymore. We're going to have to change our measure of absolute poverty because it's slipped below 10% of the world's population, and it's an absolute free fall. Life expectancy has climbed dramatically everywhere. I mean, almost every single metric you can think of is improving. So this is fantastic. But it's still early days for the Enlightenment. There's still lots of non-evidence-based decisions being made by politicians and managers and others. There's still lots of quackery and superstition. So I remember Carl Sagan's book, Science is a Candle in the Dark. That's the cause. The Enlightenment is a scientific revolution, but it also runs with a whole lot of social things too. Of the slogan for the Royal Society, the first science organisation, was nullius in verba, which means basically don't accept anyone's word. Don't take just because the king says it or the pope says it or something. That doesn't matter. Ask for the evidence, And this of course leads to lots of this changed society. We stopped going, oh well, your view counts more because you're male, or your view counts more because you've got this title. So it is a wonderful thing, the Enlightenment, but it's still got a long way to go. There are still people who are being killed because they don't hold views on, that they don't hold the religious view of the country or something. So we've still got a long way to go. And that, I'm a big fan of human civilization. I'm a great optimist. I think we're moving all in the right direction. It doesn't mean I don't think we're moving fast enough or something. So that's what motivates me.
Okay, good. Last question. What do you think the future of marketing holds?
Oh, predicting the future, of course, is a mug's game. We have some of the best forecasting scientists in the world associated with the Institute, people like Scott Armstrong and Keston Green, and they would say predicting is really, really hard. So be conservative. So I'm not going to give you any out there predictions. What I do think is we will see lots more automation, and this is a good thing. There's lots of day-to-day marketing tasks that can be automated. And so I guess this is a pattern that's been running, in the same way that things like washing machines stuff came in. The drudgery will be taken away, and there'll be more time and much more premium placed on actually thinking. So the implications for that for any marketer is that you really need to upskill, and I don't mean the sort of upskilling which is, just the basic, like how to place an ad on Facebook. I mean deep knowledge about how buyers buy, how brands grow, and working out the million empirical questions that we have in marketing. Like, what works best in this situation? How should I be judging this particular activity? So the future of marketing, I suppose it looks bright for the Ehrenberg Bass Institute. It's the bread and butter, but the future belongs to the thinking marketers rather than just the doers.
I think that's a bright future for most good marketers.
I think so, yes. But it's still, we've got a long way to go. I remember the funniest line that a marketing director once said to me, he said, I'd love to get my staff together to learn about what price promotions do, but we're so busy at the moment.
Oh, yes.
What, you mean like doing price promotions? And he went, oh, yes.
Right. I know. It's like a chicken and the egg argument half the time. It's funny. Well, I can't thank you enough. It's been an enlightening conversation, and I'm sure the listeners are going to love it.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Great. I look forward to hearing about it, hearing what people think.
Marketing Today is brought to you by Atomic. Atomic focuses on unleashing the growth potential for clients we serve. Atomic is a strategic consultancy specializing in business, marketing, brand, and innovation. Our singular goal is to help you accelerate your efforts with the right mix of expertise, analysis, and creativity. Check us out at atomic.com. ATOMCK.com. Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me, with project management by Sarah Williams, audio production by Aaron Campbell, writing and editing by Kevin Greeley, social media support by Megan Woods, art and graphic design by Sarah Dell. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends and colleagues about the show. We love to hear from listeners at info@atomic, ATOMCK.com. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.